thanks for joining me. If you watched my last video, you'll know this summer my husband and I took a road trip through parts of Europe and spent a couple months exploring some of our favorite places, as well as visiting some that we hadn't been to before. In this little video, I wanted to share with you the brief time we spent in Salzburg, Austria. This was my first time in Salzburg, and I found it to be such a charming and peaceful city. It was easy to navigate by foot, and even though it's a popular tourist destination, thanks to its rich history and of course its connection to the sound of music, it never felt crowded or overwhelming. Everything just moved at a gentle pace, which I really appreciated. Meandering the streets of Salzburg in a light rain that persisted throughout our visit only seemed to make the city more charming. Our first stop was a walk through Mirabell Gardens. The gardens are a part of Mirabell Palace, which was originally built in the early 1600s and can also be visited. Over time, the palace and gardens have become one of Salzburg's most beautiful landmarks. And if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, you'll likely recognize areas throughout the gardens where various scenes were filmed. But even without that connection, it's such a nice place for a quiet walk. The gardens are perfectly manicured with sweeping flower beds and whimsical statues. As we continued our walk into the city, one of the things that struck me about Salzburg is just how much history there is. Some remarkable people also once called it home, including the famous composer Mozart and physicist Christian Doppler. The Salzach River divides the city in two, the old from the new, and the name comes from the important role it once played in transporting salt. Nowadays, the river adds a scenic beauty to the city with views of the mountains in the distance. One of the most well-known landmarks in the city is the Salzburg Cathedral. Although there were many visitors, everything seemed to slow down once you stepped inside. The soaring ceilings and light walls created a bright and peaceful atmosphere. The cathedral was present in some form or another since the 8th century, though the current Baroque version was completed in the 1600s. Mozart was baptized in this very building and later even played here. The details throughout are a sure way to get you to slow down and be still, even if just for a moment. Overlooking the city is Fortress Hohensalzburg, one of the largest and best preserved medieval castles in Europe. You can take the funicular up, but I decided to walk the steep path instead. I didn't have time to take a tour, but this 900-year-old fortress is a must-see if you have the time. And if you don't, you can still take a minute to enjoy the views over the city. In the gentle rain, I walked through St. Peter's Cemetery. This is one of the oldest cemeteries in Salzburg and feels more like a garden than a graveyard. Though the bustle of the city center is nearby, this place felt completely detached, like a little oasis, and the gray skies made the flowers seem even brighter. Right next to the cemetery is St. Peter's Church, which is part of the Abbey. Its origins go back to the late 7th century, making it one of the oldest churches in Salzburg. Stepping inside, I was struck by how bright and airy it felt. The curved lines and pastel colors gave it such a unique look that I hadn't noticed in other churches that I've visited. The beautifully preserved historic center of Salzburg has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1997. In addition, it's one of Europe's most musically significant cities, and not just because it's the birthplace of Mozart, but also for the famous Salzburg Festival, held every summer and renowned as a major cultural event. Everywhere I looked, I could see traces of this rich musical heritage, from street performers to outdoor stages set up for evening classical concerts. Music truly feels woven into the fabric of the city. Of course, while in Austria, it's hard not to notice the thriving coffeehouse culture. At any of the number of cafes, you can not only get a warm cup of coffee, but also a tasty treat. I never shy away from dessert and knew I had to try the original Mozart Kugel. This rich ball of marzipan and dark chocolate was created by Paul Fürst back in the late 1800s, and it's been a popular treat in Salzburg ever since. After my sweet treat at Café Fürst, we wandered a bit more through the quiet streets of the old town and eventually found ourselves back in the square near the cathedral, where striking modern sculptures stood in contrast to the historic buildings around them. The next day, we made our way to the grounds of Schloss Hellbrunn, a peaceful escape just outside the city. I didn't go into the palace itself, but the gardens and parks surrounding it were so calm and open, with quiet paths and views in the distance. Tucked away here is something familiar to many fans of The Sound of Music: the glass gazebo from the famous 16 going on 17 scene. Although the scene from the movie wasn't filmed in this very spot, the gazebo was gifted to the city after filming wrapped and later moved here to the Hellbrunn grounds. On our way out of Salzburg, we made one final stop, the Sound of Music Trail. This is the spot where Maria sings Do Re Mi with the Von Trapp children, and standing there, it's easy to see why they chose this spot. The landscape feels like a painting: open meadows, the mountains in the distance, and the silhouette of a castle in the background. It was a perfect place to end our time in Salzburg, full of that quiet magic that seems to live in the hills around. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this little video. I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to see more from my perspective and where I head next, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Until next time, thanks!